We offloaded the business for $1.2 billion, and you're out. My father didn't flinch as he pushed the paperwork toward me. All the money heads to Brent. He's the one with the big ideas. You're merely the assistant, Megan. Sign this freelance contract now so we can collect the funds, or I'll make sure no laboratory in the nation ever hires you again. I glanced at my mother. She was inspecting her reflection in her teaspoon, avoiding my gaze completely. I turned to Brent. He was already uncorking a bottle of Dom Perignon, chuckling at my expense. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I simply reached for the pen. They believed they were robbing me of everything I'd earned, but in reality, they were sealing their own downfall. Before I reveal why that signature turned into the costliest error they ever made, leave a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I'd like to know how widely this tale spreads. I didn't overturn the table or insist on the justice I'd been refused for 29 years. I simply stared at my mother. Susan was fixated on the fizz in her champagne flute, frightened that meeting my eyes would force her to admit she was robbing her own child of a career. Did you have any idea? I asked quietly. She kept her head down. It's just commerce, Megan. Your father and Brent. They've got a plan. You're the researcher. Business isn't your strength. I shifted my eyes to Brent. He lounged in his leather seat, shoes propped on the desk, already messaging someone about his fresh fortune. He'd never once combined a single substance in a beaker. To him, H2O probably sounded like a fashion label. All at once, the fury drained away, replaced by a sharp, detached understanding. For years I'd wondered why they handled me like this. Why did I grind through 18-hour days in the underground lab while Brent occupied the fancy office? Why was my cash considered household funds, but theirs counted as venture money? I used to believe they despised me. But right. Then, facing their arrogant expressions, the reality hit me. It wasn't hatred. It was resentment. They resented me because I was capable. My skill acted as a harsh, unrelenting reflection of their own incompetence. Each time I rescued the firm, it underscored how helpless they truly were. If I battled them now, sued, shouted, claimed my portion, I'd only perpetuate the same pattern. I'd be attempting to repair them again. Trying to rescue them from their own avarice. What if I simply refused? I examined the freelance document below me. It was crafted to wound me. It removed my position, my shares, and my seniority. It labeled me a short-term outside consultant with no ownership stake. Yet it accomplished one more thing their expensive attorneys clearly failed to mention. It removed my responsibility. As a C-level executive and CTO, I carried a legal obligation to alert the board and prospective purchasers about serious product dangers. If I knew the item was defective and kept quiet in that role, I could face lawsuits. Possibly even jail time. But as a freelance consultant, my sole obligation was to complete the precise duties listed in the agreement. And this agreement never mentioned oversight or assurance. It only required me to depart. I reflected on the recipe. The Ageless Radiance Moisturizer. The item set to reach 500,000 buyers across the globe. I considered the degradation speed. Without the balancing additive, a formula locked in my memory. An additive I prepared by hand every 2 days because I refused to share the method with them, the lotion wouldn't merely expire. It would transform into a dark, foul-smelling muck within 48 hours of being unsealed. By signing, I wasn't merely abandoning the payout. I was abandoning the burden of protecting them when science inevitably rebelled. Come on, Richard snapped, we're on a schedule. The purchasers are waiting. Fine, I replied. I removed the cap. I wrote my name with a deliberate stroke. Megan Vance, freelance consultant. I returned the document across the polished wooden surface. Finished, I announced. I'll gather my belongings. Security can forward them later. Brent smirked. We can't risk you taking proprietary information. Keep the coat, I told him as I rose. You'll find it useful. I moved toward the glass exit. I didn't glance back at the panoramic city view. I didn't glance back at the relatives who'd just betrayed me for a bank deposit. I exited the conference room, traveled the corridor, and stepped into the lift. When the doors sealed, silencing their cheers, I glanced at my wristwatch. The initial delivery was due to depart the storage facility in 6 days. The timer had begun. I steered my decade-old car beyond the secure neighborhood where my parents resided, beyond the upscale showrooms where Brent purchased his vehicles, until the roads narrowed and the structures became worn brick. My place wasn't luxurious. It was a remodeled single-room unit in an old factory zone. The rent stayed low because the atmosphere carried traces of fuel and worn tires. I opened the lock and threw the coat, my goodbye gift, onto the sofa bed. 3 years earlier, I hadn't lived here. 3 years earlier, I possessed a trust account. My grandmother had bequeathed me $500,000. It was meant to grant me independence. It was intended as startup funds for a peaceful existence free from Richard and Susan's endless pressure for flawlessness. But then the company reached crisis point. I recalled the meal, not in an executive suite, but around their dining table. Richard sat with his face buried in his palms. Vendors had stopped supplying. The lender was demanding repayment. The whole operation stood 2 days from collapse. "We only need temporary funding," Richard had begged. "Enough to purchase ingredients for the upcoming collection. We'll repay you plus interest, Megan. You're supporting the family." I handed over the check. $500,000. Every dollar I owned. I requested no agreement. I demanded no ownership. I believed in them. And how did they reward that faith? They relegated me to the cellar. While the company image grew through elegant, simple designs and elite social events, I labored 18-hour stretches in an airless space beneath the storage area. The airflow was terrible. Summers brought temperatures near 38 degrees Celsius. I suffered chemical injuries on my fingertips because Susan deemed proper protective gear an avoidable expense. I developed Stabilizer X in that space. I kept the unstable elements functional so the ageless Radiance moisturizer delivered results. I rested on a folding bed beside the separator because a 2-degree shift ruined everything. And while I toiled in stifling darkness, Brent shaped the public image. I recalled spotting expense reports left by mistake on the printer one month. $20,000 for a product debut in Ibiza. $6,000 for client meals that were simply Brent and his companions. $12,000 monthly for a downtown residence because suburban travel supposedly hampered his inspiration. When I questioned Richard why I survived on instant noodles while Brent enjoyed premium steak on company funds, he barely lifted his eyes from the newspaper. "Brent represents the brand. Megan," he replied, tone thick with superiority. "He has to appear prosperous to draw capital. That's image building. Your contribution. That was responsibility. You earn no praise for fulfilling what a daughter should do. Responsibility." I surveyed my cramped, dim living space. I studied my marked hands. They viewed my $500,000 as a donation. They saw my efforts as a requirement. They assumed they could claim the creation I perfected, sell it for $1 billion, and leave me with only a worn garment. But they overlooked something crucial. When you treat the designer like property, don't be shocked when she ceases to support the structure. I retrieved my phone. I didn't contact an attorney. Not yet. I simply opened my schedule and placed an alert 6 days ahead. That was when the initial batch would reach shops. That was when the reaction would initiate the sequence I was no longer compensated to halt. 7 days afterward, the funds arrived. $100 million. The opening portion. I observed it unfold via news on my laptop from the kitchen counter. Richard and Brent stood on stage beside Omnipharm's chief executive. Cameras flashed. Richard appeared regal, reclaiming his empire. Brent resembled a kid handed unlimited sweets. "Breakthrough," Richard declared to the journalists, smiling broadly. "This is the enduring mark of the Vance lineage. We crafted this blend from scratch. We invested our hearts. He omitted the grandmother whose inheritance funded the initial equipment. He omitted the daughter who inhaled toxic vapors for 3 years while he enjoyed leisure. My device vibrated nearby. A message from Susan. The celebration dinner is this evening at the Ritz. Stay away. We don't want your bitter presence upsetting the backers. We'll forward payment for your efforts sometime. Sometime. I ignored it. I dismissed the alert. Then another notice appeared. An internal company message they hadn't removed my private email from. Subject: critical. Dispatch notice from CEO office. Brent Vance. Immediately effective. We are overriding the last inspection pause. Customer demand is overwhelming. We can't delay for technicians to check items. Release the full inventory of 500,000 pieces to worldwide outlets at once. We require stocked displays by Monday. Additionally, to the entry-level science team, your roles are terminated. We now possess capital. We no longer require geeks holding things back. Security will remove you. I gazed at the display. He was dispatching the stock. The stock that had waited 5 days in storage. The stock requiring the preservative introduced at the 96-hour mark to prevent molecular collapse. He wasn't merely ignoring a precaution. He was disregarding the formulation entirely. My fingers automatically moved toward the device. A habit ingrained over 29 years of repair. Rescue. Resolve the chaos. I could reach the distribution supervisor. I could contact the OmniFarm integration group. I could alert everyone that they were releasing 500,000 hazardous items. I could preserve their standing. I could shield them from the legal storm ahead. My finger paused above the dial icon. Then I withdrew. Throughout my existence, I'd served as the fallback. When Brent struggled with schoolwork, I completed his assignments. When Richard exceeded budgets on promotions, I ensured salaries were met. I'd persuaded myself this was affection. I believed repeated rescues would eventually earn appreciation. But they didn't value the rescuer. They only resented depending on one. If I intervened now, rushing to block the dispatch, the cycle would persist unchanged. Richard would insist he spotted the flaw. Brent would accuse me of exaggeration. Susan would claim I sought attention. They'd accept the protection, pocket the profits, and abandon me once more. Alerting them wasn't kindness, it was facilitation. It permitted their ongoing recklessness and malice. I understood then that the strongest response wasn't confrontation, outrage, or litigation. It was compliance with their demand. They demanded my exit. They demanded I cease being useful. So I set the phone aside. I observed the system log shift from paused to dispatched. Quiet wasn't weakness. Quiet was power. And I had activated it. 48 hours. That's the duration science needed to overtake their greed. I sat at my modest workspace, a table in the living room corner, distant from the cellar setup, when the initial alert appeared on my screen. An Instagram mention. A prominent cosmetics creator with 3 million followers shared an opening video of the Ageless Radiance Moisturizer. I tapped play. Hey every. I'm thrilled about this one, she announced, displaying the stylish, gold-stamped container. $500, so I'm anticipating magic. She removed the lid. She froze. Not for effect. Genuine surprise. She angled the container toward the lens. Rather than the advertised shimmering ivory lotion, it held a dense, murky brown paste. It resembled engine grease blended with dirt. Gross, she murmured. She brought it nearer. Then jerked away. Retching. My goodness. It reeks like rotten eggs. Like sulfur. She let the container fall onto her table. Lumana? What happened here? Is this real? I refreshed. Replies poured in. Mine is the same. Just opened it, smells like a drain. Should it be brown? The site pictures white lotion. I checked Twitter. Hashtag Lumina fraud was surging. Users uploaded jar images. Some brown. Some ebony. Some split into oily fluid and coarse sediment. The process was accelerated breakdown. Lacking stabilizer X to anchor the key proteins, the mixture bonded with atmospheric oxygen upon seal removal. Sulfur links fractured, emitting hydrogen sulfide, causing the odor, while the foundation disintegrated into base parts. It was repulsive. It stank. And it couldn't be reversed. My phone sounded. Not Richard. It was Mr. Thomas. You're witnessing this? He inquired. His tone even, composed. Yes, I answered. Omnifarm shares fell 12% before opening, Thomas noted. They've paused distribution. Announcing worldwide retrieval. I observed the disorder spread across my display. A broadcaster described a premium cosmetics fiasco. A skin expert cautioned against applying the degraded item due to acidity risks causing burns. I experienced an odd calm. No joy. No sorrow. Merely confirmation. Megan, Thomas continued. They'll target you. They'll claim you installed a sabotage mechanism. I didn't, I stated evenly. I constructed a functioning vehicle. They chose to operate it dry. I understand, Thomas said. They don't. Nor does Omnifarm. Prepare your documents. We'll require that agreement. It's digitized already, I replied. Excellent. Remain indoors. Avoid the entrance. Allow their frenzy. I ended the call. I regarded the vial of stabilizer X on my surface. A tiny container of transparent fluid. I'd created it personally. Here in my kitchen. Simply to confirm I still possessed the skill. One single drop. That was sufficient per production run. One drop to preserve the lotion pale, secure, and potent. One drop to rescue $1 billion transaction. But I no longer held staff status. I was a freelance consultant. And my agreement contained no clause about rescuing them from folly. You didn't install a sabotage mechanism, I murmured to the vacant space, echoing Thomas. You simply declined to serve as their power source. I shut my laptop as the headline broke. Omnifarm filed suit against Lumina leadership for $200 million in deception. Contract violation. Carelessness. 15 minutes afterward, Susan phoned, pleading for my return, to execute release forms and detach from blame. I recognized the trap. Yet I attended. Bringing solely the freelance documents signed 6 days prior. The facility grounds swarmed with law enforcement vehicles. Within, Susan walked anxiously, Richard perspired, and Brent gestured wildly at my arrival, shouting I'd ruined the merchandise. Authorities inspected my possessions. Discovered a placed container of reactive substance. And restrained me before reporters. Richard and Brent delivered emotional remarks portraying me as an envious destroyer intent on ruining the family enterprise. An hour passed. The entrance opened. Mr. Thomas, my legal counsel, entered. He disclosed the facts. By compelling freelance status to seize my ownership, they'd eliminated my accountability. Section 14 verified no obligation existed for me to safeguard or warrant the merchandise. Richard and Brent solely had endorsed the sale assurances to Omnifarm. Their scheme to implicate me reversed entirely. Omnifarm and authorities proceeded to confiscate their holdings. I departed unrestricted. 3 weeks on, I licensed my unwritten recipe to Omnifarm for $50 million and established my independent scientific enterprise. Meanwhile, Richard and Brent forfeited it all. Residence, vehicles, inheritances, and their standing. I glimpsed them once more beyond insolvency proceedings, shattered, accusing one another, awaiting public transit. I moved past them, erased the family messages, and at last recovered my existence quietly.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a twist. Stay tuned to Reddit Tales Times for your daily dose of drama, laughs, and unbelievable stories.